in funding and opening doors that initially started with, I'm just going to pat your back, you pat mine. And
right.
then down the road, it became this situation that became very dire and a very dark mark on our American history.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't want that getting out.
I'm certain of it. And, I'm kind of mixed on this because, one, I do think, if they have direct evidence that the Saudis were involved, it should be put out there. I see the need for that information because, by all means, we went after the Taliban and all this because of 9/11. So why should we, the Saudis get a pass? But then you also have to consider our relationship with Saudi Arabia. They're sitting on the head of OPEC. They have a lot of our treasury debt and things like that. And the Saudi foreign minister has threatened that his country would sell off up to $750 billion in U.S. Treasury secretaries and other assets if these reports come out. So, this could be a major, major impact to our economy in a time where it's already really fragile. So I can see both sides of the argument there.
There's a part of me that says, and I get your point. There's a part of me that says, what, just rip the Band-Aid off and what happens, happens. Mm. These families deserve that.
Right.
And then there's a part of me that says, as the American people, do we truly need to walk through this door?
Right. Yeah, it's a very, very heavy question, especially when you consider everything going on in the world today. The threats from Daesh, the craziness out of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and I'm actually going to be talking about those here in just a second. Saudi Arabia is an ally. They are actually doing almost all the bombing in Yemen. Can we afford to piss them off and have them against us as well? Probably wouldn't be the smartest move at this juncture, I wouldn't think.
I don't know, it's a tough spot for me to be in because at this point, I think I have become so jaded, and maybe it's because I'm becoming friends with more libertarians that I'm getting this conspiracy-like mind. Mm-hmm. But at this point, I really wonder. I think the word ally is pretty much just a title these days.
It is. There's varying levels of it, and I've said many times if things were to hit the fan in like a global conflict type scenario, you'd find out real quick who the allies were, and it may not be the ones we think it is. And part of that is the fault of this administration. I've talked a lot about their foreign policy. I don't really need to get into that. But it doesn't change the fact that things are freaking crazy right now. Absolutely crazy. Last week, I did 2 stories on 2 separate days about what the Russians did to our Navy. Did you catch those while you were out and about?
I did. I actually saw the videos, and my mouth just kind of hit the floor.
Yeah, what we're talking about on 2 days, one was the Monday and one was on Tuesday. The USS Donald Cook was sailing in I believe it was in the Baltic Sea, and it was in the Baltic Sea, and they kept getting buzzed by Russian fighter jets and attack helicopters. And the one actually on the second day, I think they made something like 30 passes, and the one actually came within like 30 feet of the ship. And we complained about it. We filed a diplomatic. What's the term they use? The protest or whatever, which nothing's going to come of that. But I hate to say it, but I called exactly what was going to happen because I suggested that, this is Putin's way of pushing the boundaries a little bit, and he wants to make us look like the aggressors. Because I said if, what would happen if one of those planes would have malfunctioned and it would have hit our ship? Or if they would have felt threatened and shot the fighter down, things would have got pretty hairy pretty quick, and it's exactly playing out right now because Russia, yesterday, accused the United States of intimidation by sailing the naval destroyer through the Baltic Sea. And they said that the Russian military would respond with all necessary measures to any future incidents.
I have to wonder if John Kerry is willing to retract what he said after they buzzed us, or if he's still willing to stand by it. Because he actually said after that happened, no, we were in every right. If they had decided to shoot at that plane, they were justified. Mm-hmm. Well, now that Russia has come out and said that, I wonder if he still stands by that statement.
Right. And, the USS Cook was on routine business near Poland when, these harassments, these overflights took place. NATO diplomat said, quote, "We were in international waters. This was a planned exercise. It wasn't like they just said, let's see how close we can get to Russia in the Baltic Sea." But this, folks, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about Putin's playbook. They completely ignored the fact that they, did these overflights. And, if you're within 30 feet of a ship, I don't care if that plane was armed or not, that's a threat to me. But they don't talk about that at all. They're saying, well, it's, this is just them, being aggressive towards us, so we're going to defend ourselves. I can't shake this feeling that they're setting the table here to have an excuse if something actually happens, and this thing, spins out of control.
But it's to me, it's kind of like, two kids get into a fight in the cafeteria and they get taken to the principal's office. Mm-hmm. And the one kid who had been antagonizing said, well, I did that because he looked at me wrong.
Yeah.
There's really no difference. Mm-hmm. America was where look, it's no secret when we decided to go, well, sometimes it is, but in this case, it's no secret that we were in those waters. They knew we were in those waters. We were part of a NATO exercise.
Right.
It's not like we just said, hey, let's go check out this sea today.
Right.
So, we filed the proper paperwork. Mm-hmm. We were there, and then you're going to get pissy because we looked at you wrong?
Yeah. Unbelievable. And, the other article I posted up here comes from the Army Times because this highlights the other issue, in particular with Russia. We're going to talk about the Iranians and the Chinese here in a minute. But specifically with Russia, I keep talking about their problem with NATO because that's what could get us heavily involved in something. It involves the them going into Ukraine. It involves their problems with Turkey. It involves all their drills where they've practiced taking over NATO countries, and that's why we are increasing our support in NATO and adding all kinds of I believe it's a brigade size element to Europe. We're sending over tanks and artillery and all kinds of stuff. And where are we parking it all happens to just be on the border of Russia. So the first meeting of the NATO and Russia Council in over 2 years took place yesterday. They said they had frank and serious discussion about the situation in Ukraine, the military activities of NATO and Russia, security situation in Afghanistan, among others. And the NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg said, quote, "NATO and Russia have profound and persistent differences. Today's meeting did not change that." So, again...
It kind of reminds me of the day that I was going through my divorce when we went to mediation, mm-hmm. and neither of us were willing to budge.
Right.
And the mediator came out and went, "Thanks for coming. Didn't achieve anything, but at least we did it." Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing. Right. The mediator went in, neither side cooperated. It's still going to be an ugly divorce. Mm-hmm. I guess we're still going to continue to fight over the kids.
Right. And NATO has not met directly with Russia since the annexation of Crimean Peninsula there in Ukraine, which Russia has never apologized over, and they don't even want to talk about it. Who is this? Peskov, the Russian representative here, who is the press secretary to Putin, blames NATO for a lack of trust. He said, "We are seeing hostile actions by boosting NATO potential at our borders. It's a threat to our national interest. NATO's recent actions show that the alliance is still working on its original concept to constrain Russia and confront it. We're glad there is dialogue, but it won't be easy." So again, folks, big picture here. What do you think? I mean, who do you side with? Do you look at, okay, NATO is overreacting and Russia has the right to be worried about us, sending over, equipment and troops and stuff at their borders? Or do you go to NATO's side and say, hey, we have to worry about Russia, who has tripled their defense spending, is picking on NATO countries who, stole a chunk of a country? Personally, I think I lean towards the NATO side of that argument.
I would lean towards the NATO side of that argument, but at the same time, NATO hasn't exactly always operated in the best interest of everyone either.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
So, it's that whole situation where there's no euphoric, be-all, end-all, perfect solution to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a situation where you have to balance out and judge the reality of which direction a situation can go.
Right.
And you've kind of got to base it off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And again, that's that big picture we're talking about. And that's why we discuss these things, folks, so you can kind of make up your own mind and see where the information takes you. And continuing on this line of different threats, of course, we've talked a lot about terrorism. We talked a lot about Russia. It's been a little bit since I've picked on our buddies there in Iran. I guess I should say the president's buddies in Iran. Iran now, there was a lot of talk. It was about last month, I think it was. They were doing these ballistic missile tests, and the president said that we weren't happy about it, but it didn't violate the nuclear deal, and that he wanted the UN to take action on it. Well, while we're still waiting on the UN to do stuff, I mean, we've put new sanctions and stuff on them, but again, the nuclear deal's still a go. Guess what Iran just did? They test-fired a space rocket that could also conveniently be used as a nuclear missile. Yeah.
Well, that wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they claim that it was it was a test for their space program, and they got the technology for it from another buddy of the grand scale. That would be North Korea. The same folks who are threatening to wipe us off the face of the earth and doing their own nuclear tests and their own missile tests.
Oh, well, this is going well.
Yeah, they're buddy with the North Koreans. This State Department official John Kirby said he was unable to confirm the missile launch. He said, obviously, we're watching this as best we can. Certainly, if it's true, we're talking about a ballistic missile launch or testing of ballistic missile technologies. That's obviously a concern to us. It's not consistent, as we said before, with the Security Council resolution. So we're not going to do anything about this. As far as the administration's concerned, everything is still hunky-dory and good to go. But, this is a big-time concern. And you know for a fact that the Israelis have got to be getting really antsy to do something to Iran. They've never hesitated in the past to go in and take out, nuclear facilities, to take out weapons plants. They just launched a missile that could do one of two things. It can, launch a satellite into orbit, or they can mount a freaking nuclear warhead to it. That's as serious as it gets.
That takes the concept of the Swiss Army knife to a whole new level.
Right? Yeah. And if that's not enough to worry about, another one that we've had some issues with in recent days, China. Of course, we have a lot of tension with the Chinese right now about the South China Sea and their militarization of those islands that they're making down there. China has now tested what they're calling a terrifyingly powerful nuclear missile. It is the longest range of any ballistic missile in the